and Richard just needs to kind of
All right, colleagues, I apologize for the delay. We are ready to get started. So please take your seats. Friends, it is now decision time, and the choices that you are set to make are vitally important. They launch a decade of increasing ambition across mitigation, adaptation, finance, and loss and damage, marking the road to keeping 1.5 degrees within reach, achieving the global goal on adaptation, delivering on the $100 billion goal, and setting the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. These decisions conclude the outstanding elements of the Paris Rulebook, enabling full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And they place an unprecedented focus on the issue of loss and damage. Collectively, I believe the decisions you are about to make demonstrate the continued relevance and leadership of this multilateral process. They promote inclusive climate action, recognizing the important role played by civil society, indigenous peoples, local communities, youth, and other stakeholders. They complement the impressive commitments and actions of all those who joined us in Glasgow, driving progress on coal, cars, cash, and trees. We met here under extraordinary circumstances, and the negotiations have been far from easy. I can tell you that definitely. But I have been struck by the determination that you have all shown to get our work done, to forge consensus on an unprecedented agenda, and ultimately agree something meaningful for our people and our planet. Each and every one of you and the nations you represent has stepped up here in Glasgow, agreeing to do what it takes to keep 1.5 alive. And for that, I am infinitely grateful. It is now my great honor to take us through the formal adoption proceedings. I now declare open the 12th meeting of COP26. The order in which the agenda items will be taken up is posted on the screen. So first, I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Glasgow Climate Pact, contained in document FCCC/2021/L13. I see China is seeking an intervention. I invite China to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. According to what India, China, South Africa, and Bolivian delegates and like-minded countries and other developing countries expressed concerns, we have talked to the other stakeholders and parties concerned, carried out consultation with a view to ensuring the success of this meeting. We have found a constructive program. The elements have been submitted to the President. We thank all the parties for their flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I see India wishes to take the floor. India, you have the floor.
Mr. President, thank you very much to provide an opportunity to us. On the text of para 20 of discussion of 1/COP26 and para 36 of the draft decision of 1/CMA3, we, after discussion with the presidency and various stakeholders and the other countries, the next text we propose and will be read as follow. If you permit me, I read that. Okay. Now, I propose call upon parties to accelerate the development, deployment, and dissemination of technologies and adoption of policies to transition towards low-emission energy systems, including by rapidly scaling up deployment of clean power generation and energy efficiency measures, including accelerating effort to phase down unabated coal power and phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, while providing targeted support to the poorest and the most vulnerable in line with national circumstances and recognizing the need for support towards a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you to China, India for their interventions. Dear delegates, you have a revised proposal for the paragraphs that were set out by Minister Yadav. Could I ask whether distinguished delegates, having heard the proposal, is this proposal agreeable to you? I have two interventions. I have an intervention from Switzerland. Switzerland, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the EIG, we would like to express our profound disappointment that the language that we have agreed on coal and fossil fuel subsidies has been further watered down as a result of an intransparent process. Let us be clear, we do not need to phase down, but to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies. We were told in the stocktake meeting that no changes can be adopted to the presented text when we try to close a loophole in the market decision. The EIG does not want to risk that we leave Glasgow without an outcome. Therefore, we did not oppose this additional last-minute change weakening the outcome of Glasgow, but we are disappointed both about the process and about this last-minute change. This will not bring us closer to 1.5, but make it more difficult to reach it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Switzerland, for your intervention. The European Union wishes to take the floor. I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is no secret to this gathering that the European Union would have wanted to go even further than the initial text in the cover text on coal. This is a consequence of our own painful experience with coal. We all know that European wealth was built on coal, and if we don't get rid of coal, European death will also be built on coal. We know full well that coal has no future. And this is what we're working on with our own plans to put an end to coal in Europe in the foreseeable future. Having said that, and then, of course, it will be no surprise to you that what was just read out to us is a further disappointment. Not because we want to be right, but because we know that the longer you take to get rid of coal, the more burden you put on a natural environment, but also the more burden you put on your economy, because coal is simply not a smart economic proposition either. That's why we want to speed up the exit out of coal. Now, having said all that, if I look at the conclusions we are going to be drawing today, we are going to work bloody hard on getting rid of coal, and I believe this conclusion will help us work in that direction. The European Union will be strongly committed to that, not just within the European Union, but also with our partners worldwide. And for us, the model we have found, together with the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany and France, on South Africa, should be the template of how we help other coal-producing countries to rid themselves of this fossil. And that is, Mr. President, what we will want to do in the years to come. So, having now expressed my disappointment, I want to reiterate what I said in my earlier intervention. This should not stop us from deciding today on what, even before you've read everything, I have to say is a historic decision under your leadership, and you can be very proud of that, Mr. President.
I thank the European Union for their intervention. I now give the floor to Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and also for the great effort you made on the text. We fully align with the statement made by Switzerland on behalf of the EIG. Liechtenstein is deeply disappointed that this COP26 was not held as a fully inclusive and transparent process. Small countries were not equally represented in the bilateral consultations with the COP presidency, and we believe weakening the language regarding the phase-out of fossil fuels, especially coal, is nor ambitious nor in line with reaching the 1.5 degrees temperature goal. For the greater good, we must swallow this bitter pill. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Liechtenstein, for your intervention. I now give the floor to Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Mexico fully aligns with the statement made by Switzerland on behalf of the EIG. We believe we have been sidelined in a non-transparent and non-inclusive process. At the stocktake, we already compromised to what we perceived was an agreement by parties, even if we were unhappy with the text. But now we learn that there are even further changes that we were not being made aware. We all have remaining concerns, but we're told we could not reopen the text. Mexico, for example, believes the language on human rights should have been strengthened and are very, very disappointed that such demands were not heard, while others can still ask to water down our promises. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Mexico for that intervention. I now call Marshall Islands to take the floor. Marshall Islands, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. On behalf of the Marshall Islands, I wish to read into the record our profound disappointment with the change in the language on coal from phase out to phase down. I ask that this be reflected in the report of this meeting. This commitment on coal had been a bright spot in this package. It was one of the things we were hoping to carry out of here and back home with pride, and it hurts deeply to see that bright spot dim. We accept this change with the greatest reluctance. We do so only, and I really want to stress, only, because there are critical elements of this package that people in my country need as a lifeline for their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall Islands, for your intervention. I will now take an intervention from Fiji. Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few days ago, in fact about 4 days ago, when we talked about some language on loss and damage, we were told that we're introducing something at the last minute. It's rather ironic that just about 2 hours ago we discussed the text, and now there's an amendment being made to that, and that I would call last minute, without any due process being followed. I think the point of the matter is that 1.5 degree has always been a red line for us, in particular low-lying countries, island states. What we'd like to express, of course, is not just our astonishment, but our immense disappointment in the manner in which this has been introduced. And secondly, that we seem to be dealing with these various clauses in a disjointed fashion. There's no confluence between the earlier clauses prior to this that talks about the 1.5 degree, and indeed the impact on our ability to reach 1.5 degree by having now what we call a phase down, which in fact has no demonstrable measurements, no methodology as to how we will measure this phase down. And I think that is critically important, and we need to remember that. And I hope all the other countries that have the capacity and the ability to be able to do so will in fact do so. Because small island states like ours do not have the capacity, and we're reliant on all the other good countries that believe in phasing out coal will do that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiji, for your intervention. And now I will take an intervention from Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. President. The 39 leaders of the Alliance of Small Island States in September signed a declaration to urge major emitters, particularly the G20, to phase out all fossil fuel subsidies by 2023. We were disappointed to find the addition of the inefficiency from the G20 language, but can accept that this is as far as we can go today. The challenges with securing today's historic commitment for the UNFCCC historic to phase out inefficient fossil fuels, despite knowing that this is factually required to stay on a 1.5 degree global pathway, deeply concerns AOSIS. The challenges of the energy transition are real, and we recognize that the political risks that come with the climate change response and the monopolistic nature of the fossil fuel industry in today's world are real. We need to double down on retraining workforces so that this is an easy decision to make going forward. We appreciate the outcome of today, and we can accept the changes, although we reiterate the challenges around the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda, for your intervention. May I just say to all delegates, I apologize for the way this process has unfolded, and I'm deeply sorry. I also understand the deep disappointment. But I think, as you have noted, it's also vital that we protect this package. Delegates, please. Delegates, thank you, friends. We need to proceed. Thank you very much. So, given what interventions we've had, I propose that the revised proposal is adopted as orally amended. A revised version, a written version, will be issued shortly. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. So I now invite the COP to consider Agenda Item 5, reporting from parties not included in Annex 1 to the Convention. This item was considered by the SBI, And I want to thank the chair of the SBI and parties for their hard work and for forwarding to the COP the progress of their work on the revision of the terms of reference of the consultation group of experts, following which I undertook further consultations. I therefore invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Revised Terms of Reference of the Consultative Group of Experts contained in document FCCC/2021/L12. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Dear delegates, please stay in your seats as we will be now convening the CMA immediately. So the 12th meeting of the COP is suspended, and I now declare open the 12th meeting of CMA 3. The order in which the agenda items will be taken up is posted on the screen. I now invite the CMA to adopt the decision entitled Glasgow Climate Pact contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L16. And at this point, I recall the oral amendment made to the decision that was just adopted under the COP, document L13, and I propose that the amendment also be applied to CMA document FCCC/PA/CMA/L16, and I propose that this decision be adopted as amended. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I see a number of parties would like to intervene at this point, so I'd now like to give the floor to Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. President. AOSIS requests that the COP President firmly acknowledge that the G77 and China position on loss and damage that was tabled this session. The common position was and still is to establish the Glasgow Loss and Damage Facility under the financial mechanism and to lay out a process with workshops, technical meetings, technical papers, submissions from parties and inclusion of other stakeholders, as well as inputs to include the work of the WIM ExCom and its experts, including on action and support. The aim was to consultatively define the facility and make a recommendation to COP27. What we have before us in one CMA 3 is one standalone dialogue with no clear destination. AOSIS expresses our grievance with this text. Our group strongly considered requesting the deletion of paragraphs 73 and 74 in 1 CMA 3 because of this inadequacy. AOSIS, in the interest of reaching a consensus, will accept the text as gavelled, as it stands, with the clear understanding that this dialogue is a key step towards the creation of a loss and damage finance facility. We firmly believe that the dialogue should lead to a conclusion that the new loss and damage finance facility will be adopted at the next COP. This is the basis on which we understand the decision before us. We request assurances from the COP presidency that this is the interpretation in our acceptance of this decision, including recording this interpretation in these proceedings.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. I take note of the statement from Antigua and Barbuda. I see there is an intervention from Venezuela. Venezuela, I invite you to take the floor.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to take this opportunity to take the floor in order to refer to the decision which has just been adopted on the Paris Agreement, namely the main decision of the Paris Agreement document. We're not against this adoption, but we did want to make a brief comment, however, Mr. President. We did everything we could to do our best to converge on the impact of the unilateral coercive measures, UCMs, on the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Many countries are aware of the implications of unilateral coercive measures, the UCMs, on climate action. And That is why, Mr. President, we wanted to propose that we continue to strengthen our approach to this topic, that we can have an opportunity to express how UCMs are affecting climate action and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. We in Venezuela have been working on this link since 2020 and 2021. That is, we have brought together a significant group of experts, that is, of international renown from the academic and legal worlds. And in these plenaries, I hear that many states parties have had their awareness raised as to human rights. And there is a very deep link between this and the impact of UCMs. So human rights, environmental rights, and UCMs. And I hope that efforts will be made to promote this work, and I hope that during your presidency we'll be able to continue to work on that particular link. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Venezuela. We take note of your statement. And can I just go back and confirm to Antigua and Barbuda that the record of their statement will be put into the proceedings. So seeing no other requests to intervene, I invite the CMA to now consider Agenda Item 12, matters relating to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This item was referred to the Subster for its consideration. I thank the Chair of the Subster for his hard work on the matters relating to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and for forwarding recommendations to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations. I now invite the CMA to consider Sub-Agenda Item 12A, Guidance on Cooperative Approaches, referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decisions entitled Guidance on Cooperative Approaches, referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L18. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Delegates, I now invite the CMA to consider Sub-Agenda Item 12B, Rules, Modalities and Procedures for the mechanism established by Article 6, Paragraph 4 of the Paris Agreement. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decisions entitled Rules, Modalities and Procedures for the mechanism established by Article 6, Paragraph 4 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L19. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMA to consider Sub-Agenda Item 12C, Work Programme under the Framework for Non-Market Approaches, referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 8 of the Paris Agreement. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decisions entitled Work Programme under the Framework for Non-Market Approaches, referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 8 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L20. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. now invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 5, methodological issues relating to the enhanced transparency framework for action and support referred to in Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. This item was considered by the Subster. I thank the Chair of the Subster for his hard work on the matter of the methodological issues relating to the enhanced transparency framework and for forwarding a recommendation to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations on this matter. I note, given the adoption of Article 6, parties would retain information that is shaded in Annex 2 and delete Table 5 in that annex. In addition, the text in square brackets in Annexes 4, 6, and 7 in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L12 will be retained. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decisions entitled Guidance for Operationalizing the Modalities, Procedures and Guidelines for the Enhanced Transparency Framework referred to in Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L12. May I take it that the document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L21 as orally revised is acceptable? Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to return to Agenda Sub-Item 3B, Report of the Subsidiary Body for Implementation. The matter of common timeframes for nationally determined contributions was considered by the SPI. I thank the Chair of the SPI for her hard work on the issue and for forwarding the outcome of its work to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations on this matter. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Common Timeframes for Nationally Determined Contributions referred to in Article 4, Paragraph 10 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L12. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Dear delegates, please stay in your seats as we will be convening the CMP immediately. The 12th meeting of the CMA is suspended. I now declare open the 10th meeting of CMP 16. I now invite the CMP to adopt the decision entitled Glasgow Climate Pact, contained in document FCCC/KP/CMP/2021/L5. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMP to consider Agenda Item 5, matters relating to the Clean Development Mechanism. Parties may recall that a contact group was established, co-chaired by Mr. Yao Asafo of Ghana and Mr. Kashuhisa Kawakotsu of Japan. I thank the co-chairs for their hard work. I now invite the CMP to adopt the draft decision entitled Guidance Relating to the Clean Development Mechanism, contained in document FCCC/KP/CMP/2021/L6. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. We will return. I see that Ukraine has asked for the floor. Ukraine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, Mr. President, I make the statement on behalf of Ukraine and Kazakhstan. The transitional measures agreed for CDM, in combination with the decisions on Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, give a head start to some developing countries and not to others. We're deeply disappointed in this outcome. We hear different things from parties on whether this oversight was intentional or accidental. We firmly believe that all parties should have equal access to the instruments of Article 6.4 in transitional period. In the spirit of compromise and consensus, we have accepted the text presented by the Presidency, and we call on our partners to address the disparities created by this text, whatever was the reason for their existence. Thank you.
Ukraine, thank you for your intervention and thank you for your consideration. Colleagues, we will return to the election of the Executive Board at the closing of the CMP. I invite the CMP to consider Agenda Item 7, matters relating to the Adaptation Fund. I invite the CMP to consider Sub-Item 7A, report of the Adaptation Fund Board for 2020 and 2021. At our first meeting, a contact group was established to be co-chaired by Ms. Claudia Keller from Germany and Mr. Ali Waqas Malik from Pakistan. Thank you, Ms. Keller and Mr. Malik, for your hard work. I'm pleased to report that the group has produced a draft decision for adoption by the CMP. I invite the CMP to adopt the draft decision entitled Report of the Adaptation Fund Board for 2020 and 2021, contained in document FCCC/KP/CMP/2021/L3. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMP to consider Sub-Item 7B, fourth review of the Adaptation Fund. This item was considered by the SBI, and I thank the Chair of the SBI and parties for their hard work and for forwarding a recommendation to the CMP. I invite the CMP to adopt the draft decision entitled Fourth Review of the Adaptation Fund, contained in document FCCC/SBI/2021/L19. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Dear delegates, please stay in your seats as we will be convening the CMA immediately. The 10th meeting of the CMP is suspended. I now resume the 12th meeting of CMA 3. I now invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 7, Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage Associated with Climate Change Impacts. This item was referred to the SUBSTA and the SBI for its consideration. I thank the chairs of the SUBSTA and the SBI for forwarding their recommendation to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations on this matter. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled The Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage Associated with Climate Change Impacts, contained in document FCCC/CMA3/2021/L22. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 4, matters relating to adaptation. Sub-Item 4A, reports of the Adaptation Committee for 2019 and 2020, and Sub-Item 4B, report of the Adaptation Committee 2021 and the work on the Global Goal on Adaptation. This item was considered by the SUBSTA and the SBI. I thank the chairs of the SUBSTA and the SBI for forwarding their recommendation to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations on this matter. I now invite the CMA to adopt the decision entitled Report of the Adaptation Committee for 2019, 2020 and 2021, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L15. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh Work Programme on the Global Goal on Adaptation, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L14. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Colleagues, Maldives have asked to take the floor. Maldives, you have the floor.
Excellencies, COP President Alok Sharma, thank you so much for getting us all through this process in what has been one of the most challenging times the world has ever seen. Firstly, we welcome the agreement by parties and are proud of the establishment and launch of the work program on the global goal on adaptation. As one of the most vulnerable countries to the climate crisis, the Maldives sees this as a great achievement in adaptation, and I am proud to have co-facilitated together with Minister Teresa Ribera from Spain the agreement by parties on the establishment and immediate launch of this work program. We need to set this work program on an ambitious footing, and that is why the Maldives proposes to have an in-person launch workshop for the work program. This launch workshop will serve as a science policy interface for an in-person initial information exchange at the outset of the work program. On behalf of the government of Maldives, I communicate our offer and readiness to host this launch work program. Thank you, Mr. President.
I see there's a further intervention from Egypt. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to welcome the announcement just made by the Minister from the Maldives regarding the offer of the Maldives to host the first workshop launching the work of the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh Work Programme on the Global Goal on Adaptation. Likewise, Mr. President, it is my pleasure to also offer to host an in-person workshop under the work program in Egypt. This is really a very important achievement that we've made here in Glasgow and would like to move forward as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Egypt, for your intervention. And could I, on behalf of all of us, thank both the Maldives and Egypt for your offers to host workshops. I would now like to invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 8, Matters Relating to Finance. For Sub-Item 8A, the contact group was co-chaired by Mr. Gard Linseth from Norway and Mr. Richard Muyungi from Tanzania. For Sub-Item 8B and C, the contact groups were co-chaired by Ambassador Diane Black-Lane from Antigua and Barbuda and Mr. Toru Sugua from Japan. For Sub-Item 8D, the contact group was co-chaired by Mr. Ali Waqas Malik from Pakistan and Ms. Claudia Keller from Germany. For Sub-Item 8E, the contact group was co-chaired by Ms. Uti Honkatukia from Finland and Mr. Zahir Fakir from South Africa. For Sub-Item 8F, the contact group was co-chaired by Mr. Carlos Fuller from Belize and Mr. Georg Borsting from Norway. I thank all the co-chairs for their hard work, and I will now take up each agenda sub-item individually. I invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8A, matters relating to the Standing Committee on Finance. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Standing Committee on Finance as contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L11. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. As parties will recall, consultations on this matter of the review of the functions of the Standing Committee on Finance was undertaken under my authority with groups and parties. Parties were unable to complete the consultations on this matter. Therefore, consideration of this matter will continue at CMA 4. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8B, Guidance to the Green Climate Fund. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Guidance to the Green Climate Fund as contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L8. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8C, Guidance to the Global Environment Facility, and the draft decision entitled Guidance to the Global Environment Facility contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L10. I propose the following amendment in paragraph 7 of the draft decision to replace the word review with consideration of the support provided to developing country parties, and replace the reference of paragraph number 38 to 42. This amendment will ensure consistency with the decision adopted under CMA agenda item 5. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision as amended. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8D, matters relating to the Adaptation Fund. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Adaptation Fund contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L7. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8E, New Collective Quantified Climate Finance Goal. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled New Collective Quantified Climate Finance Goal contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L17. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMA to consider agenda sub-item 8F, compilation and synthesis of and summary report on the in-session workshop on biennial communications of information related to Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the Paris Agreement. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Compilation and Synthesis of and Summary Report on the in-session workshop on biennial communications of information related to Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L9. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to consider agenda item 11, report of the Forum on the impact of the implementation of response measures. This item was considered by the SUBSTA and the SBI. I thank the chairs of the SUBSTA and the SBI and parties for their hard work and for forwarding a recommendation to the CMA, following which I undertook further consultations. I now invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Forum on the Impact of the Implementation of Response Measures, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2021/L6/Rev1. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Colleagues, as proposed during the opening plenary of the CMA, I appointed a senior member of my delegation, COP26 envoy John Merton, to conduct informal consultations on the special needs and special circumstances of Africa. During these consultations, which were undertaken under my initiative and responsibility and without prejudice to their outcome, many parties and group of parties, including the African Group, the Independent Association for Latin America and the Caribbean, for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Alliance of Small Island States, elaborated on their own vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change. A range of views were expressed on the specific issue of the special needs and special circumstances of Africa. It is clear that there is no consensus on this issue at this time. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Dear delegates, please stay in your seats as we will be convening the COP immediately. The 12th meeting of the CMA is suspended. I now resume the 12th meeting of COP26. I now invite the conference to consider Agenda Item 7, Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage Associated with Climate Change Impacts. As proposed at the opening plenary, I requested Ambassador Nick Bridge to undertake the consultations on this matter jointly with the governance element of the Warsaw International Mechanism under CMA Agenda Item 7. Whilst considerations related to the governance of the Warsaw International Mechanism will continue at the next session, parties were able to reach a solution that will enable the critical work of the Warsaw International Mechanism to continue progress. I now invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage Associated with Climate Change Impacts, contained in document FCCC/2021/CP/L15. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the COP to consider Agenda Item 6, Report of the Adaptation Committee for 2019, 2020 and 2021. At the first meeting of the COP, I outlined that this item would be considered by the SBSTA and the SBI. I also referred to the SBSTA and the SBI the review of the progress, effectiveness and performance of the Adaptation Committee. I thank the chairs of the SBSTA and the SBI for forwarding their recommendations to the COP, following which I undertook further consultations on this matter. I now invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Report of the Adaptation Committee for 2019, 2020 and 2021, contained in document FCCC/CP/2021/L11. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Election of members of the Adaptation Committee will be taken up at the conclusion of the COP. I would now invite the COP to consider Agenda Item 8, Matters Relating to Finance. For Sub-Item 8A and F, a contact group was established, co-chaired by Mr. Georg Borsting from Norway and Mr. Carlos Fuller from Belize. For Sub-Item 8B, a contact group was established, co-chaired by Mr. Gard Linseth from Norway and Mr. Richard Muyungi from Tanzania. For sub-items 8C and D, a contact group was established, co-chaired by Ambassador Diane Black-Lane from Antigua and Barbuda and Mr. Toru Sugio from Japan. For sub-item 8E, a contact group was established, co-chaired by Eva Schroeder from the Netherlands and Daniela Veas from Chile. I thank all the co-chairs for their hard work. I will now take up each agenda sub-item individually. I invite the COP to consider agenda sub-item 8A, long-term climate finance. I invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Long-Term Climate Finance as contained in document FCCC/CP/2021/L14. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider Agenda Sub-Item 8B, matters relating to the Standing Committee on Finance. I invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Standing Committee on Finance as contained in document FCCC/2021/L9. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. On review of the functions of the SCF, as parties will recall, consultations on this matter were undertaken under my authority with groups and parties. Parties were unable to complete the consultations of this matter. Therefore, consideration of this matter will continue at COP27. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider sub-item 8C, report of the Green Climate Fund to the Conference of the Parties and guidance to the Green Climate Fund for 2020 and 2021. I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Report of the Green Climate Fund to the Conference of the Parties and guidance to the Green Climate Fund, contained in document FCCC/2021/L6. I propose an amendment, namely to remove the footnote remove footnote 4 in paragraph 6 of the draft decision. I now invite the COP to adopt the draft decision as amended. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider sub-item 8D, report of the Global Environment Facility to the Conference of the Parties and guidance to the Global Environment Facility for 2020 and 2021. I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Report of the Global Environment Facility to the Conference of the Parties and guidance to the Global Environment Facility contained in document FCCC/CP/2021/L8. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider sub-item 8E, 7th review of the financial mechanism. Parties were unable to complete their consideration of this matter. Therefore, consideration of this matter will continue at COP27. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider sub-item 8F, compilation and synthesis of and summary report of the in-session workshop on biennial communications of information related to Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the Paris Agreement. I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Compilation and Synthesis of and Summary Report on the in-session workshop on biennial communications of information related to Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the Paris Agreement, contained in document FCCC/CP/2021/L7. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the COP to consider Agenda Item 12, report of the Forum on the impact of the implementation of response measures. This item was considered by the SUBSTA and the SBI. I thank the chairs of the SUBSTA and the SBI and parties for their hard work and for forwarding a recommendation to the COP, following which I undertook further consultations. I now invite the COP to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Forum on the Impacts of the Implementation of Response Measures, contained in document FCCC/2021/L4 to FCCC/KP/CMP/2021/L2. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite delegates to consider sub-agenda item 2D, election of officers other than the President. Item 6, report of the Adaptation Committee. Agenda as item 8B, matters relating to the Standing Committee on Finance. Item 9, development and transfer of technology, and item 10, capacity building under the Convention. I would like to inform parties that consultations on the nominations for election have been concluded and nominations received for election to bodies under the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. I would like to thank Vice President Tariq for continuing these consultations. I would also like to thank all chairs and coordinators of regional groups and constituencies for their active and constructive engagement in the consultations. The list of nominations received by the Secretariat is available on the UNFCCC website. I now invite the COP to elect to its Bureau the following members as Vice President. Mr. Ibrahim Mipwa Shitima of Zambia, Ms. Gabriela Fischerova of Slovakia, Mr. Carlos Fuller of Belize, Mr. Javier Antonio Guterres Ramirez of Nicaragua, and Ms. Anne Rasmussen of Samoa. As substitute chair, Mr. Tosi Mpanu Mpanu of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As SBI chair, Ms. Marianne Carlsen of Norway. And as rapporteur, Ms. Irina Stavchuk of Ukraine. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I would like to congratulate the members of the Bureau on their election. I would also like to express appreciation to the previous Bureau members under whose guidance and leadership we have made tremendous progress during the past 2 years, especially their guidance for the organization and the work of the conference. I note that nominations are outstanding from the Asia-Pacific Group. I invite the Asia-Pacific Group to continue consultations and submit the outstanding nominations to the Secretariat as soon as possible and by the 28th of February 2022 at the latest. Once received by the Secretariat, the nominees will be deemed elected at COP26 in accordance with established practice. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Turning to the election of members of constituted bodies under the Convention, I invite the COP to elect the members of the following bodies as contained in the list of nominations: the Adaptation Committee, the CTCN Advisory Board, the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, the Standing Committee on Finance, and the Technology Executive Committee. I also invite the COP to take note of the nominations of members of the Consultative Group of Experts, the Katowice Committee of Experts, the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, and the LCIPP Facilitative Working Group. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I would like to congratulate the members of these bodies on their election. I would also like to thank all the outgoing members for their commitment and hard work that has ensured the success of the work of these bodies. I note that there are nominations outstanding for these bodies. I invite groups and constituencies to continue consultations and submit the outstanding nominations to the Secretariat as soon as possible and by the 28th of February at the latest. Once received by the Secretariat, the nominees will be deemed elected at COP26 in accordance with established practice. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Turning to the proposal from Georgia on achieving equitable geographic representation in composition of constituted bodies under the Convention. At the opening plenary meeting on Sunday, the 31st of October, I requested Vice President Tariq to consult on the proposal during his consultations on the election of officers. Vice President Tariq, in his report to the Bureau on the consultations, noted that during the consultations there was an understanding that the proposal should be addressed in a systematic manner. Vice President Tariq informed that regional groups and constituencies will continue to consult on the proposal. Vice President Tariq also informed that chairs and coordinators of groups and constituencies have requested the Secretariat to provide an assessment of the implications for constituted bodies of the proposal from Georgia. I therefore propose to continue the consultations on the proposal from Georgia in the coming year. I request the Secretariat to prepare an assessment of the proposal as requested and to make this available to chairs and coordinators of regional groups and constituencies by the 56th session of the subsidiary bodies to be held in June 2022. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Dear delegates, please stay in your seats as we will be convening the CMP immediately. The 12th meeting of the COP is adjourned. I now resume the 10th meeting of CMP 16. I invite the CMP to consider the agenda item 9, report of the Forum on the impact of the implementation of response measures. This item was considered by the SUBSTA and the SBI. I thank the chairs of the SUBSTA and the SBI and parties for their hard work and for forwarding a recommendation to the CMP, following which I undertook further consultations. I now invite the CMP to adopt the draft decision entitled Matters Relating to the Forum on the Impact of the Implementation of Response Measures, contained in document FCCC/2021/L4 to FCCC/KP/CMP/2021/L2. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now invite the CMP to consider Agenda Item 2B, Election of Additional Officers, Agenda Item 5, Matters Relating to the Clean Development Mechanism, Agenda Item 6, Matters Relating to Joint Implementation, Agenda Item 7, Matters Related to the Adaptation Fund, Agenda Item 10, Report of the Compliance Committee. I would again like to thank Vice President Tariq for his hard work in leading these consultations. The list of nominations received by the Secretariat is available on the UNFCCC website. There will be no election of an additional member of the COP Bureau, as all the members of the Bureau elected by the COP earlier today are also parties to the Kyoto Protocol. I now invite the CMP to elect the members and alternate members of the following bodies as contained in the list of nominations: the Clean Development Mechanism Executive Board, the Joint Implementation Supervisory Committee, the Kyoto Protocol Compliance Committee, and the Adaptation Fund Board. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I would like to congratulate the members and alternative members of these bodies on their election. I would also like to thank all the outgoing members and alternate members for their commitment and hard work that ensured the success of the work of these bodies. I note that there are nominations outstanding. I invite groups and constituencies to continue consultations and submit the outstanding nominations to the Secretariat as soon as possible and by the 28th of February 2022 at the latest. Once received by the Secretariat, the nominees will be deemed elected at CMP 16 in accordance with established practice. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. The 10th meeting of the CMP is adjourned. I now resume the 12th meeting of CMA 3. I now invite the CMA to consider Agenda Items 2B, Election of Additional Officers, Agenda Item 7, Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage associated with climate change impacts, Agenda Item 11, Report of the Forum on the Impact of the Implementation of Response Measures, Agenda Item 13, Report of the Committee to Facilitate Implementation and Promote Compliance referred to in Article 15, Paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement for 2020 and 2021. I would again like to thank Vice President Tariq for his hard work in leading these consultations. The list of nominations received by the Secretariat is available on the UNFCCC website. There will be no election of an additional member of the COP Bureau, as all the members of the Bureau elected by the COP earlier today are also parties to the Paris Agreement. And I invite the CMA to elect the members and alternate members of the following bodies as contained in the list of nominations. The Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, and Paris Agreement Committee to facilitate implementation and promote compliance. I also invite the CMA to take note of the nominations of members of the Katowice Committee of Experts on the impacts of the implementation of response measures. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I would like to congratulate the members and alternate members of these bodies on their election. I would also like to thank all the outgoing members and alternate members for their commitment and hard work that ensured the success of the work of these bodies. I note that there are nominations outstanding. I invite groups and constituencies to continue consultations and submit the outstanding nominations to the Secretariat as soon as possible and by the 28th of February 2022 at the latest. I also invite regional groups and constituencies to consult and transmit the nominations for members and alternate members of the supervisory body under Article 6, Paragraph 4 of the Paris Agreement as soon as possible and by the deadline of 28th of February 2022. Once the nominations that are outstanding and the nominations for the supervisory body under Article 6, Paragraph 4 of the Paris Agreement are received by the Secretariat, the nominees will be deemed elected at CMA 3 in accordance with established practice. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. The 12th meeting of the CMA is adjourned. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now open a joint third meeting of the Conference of the Parties. 11th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol. 13th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. I now invite the Executive Secretary to address the conference.
Excellencies, dear ministers, dear colleagues, thank you to everyone who attended, who participated in, who organized or followed COP26 online. Thank you for your passionate dedication to the issue of climate change. As we know and we have experienced in our process, negotiations are never easy. And while we seek an outcome that is acceptable to all, few return home completely satisfied. But this is the nature of consensus and inclusive multilateralism. Thank you to the UK Presidency for hosting COP26. I would especially like to thank Minister Sharma for his leadership and partnership during these months of hard work, and especially during the last 2 weeks. I also thank all who are part of the UK presidency team. I'm sorry I cannot name you all. You're a lot, very strong team, fantastic team. The teams, all of them, from mobilization and operations to those working shifts throughout the night to keep the agenda moving forward. It has been a unique COP, given everything we've gone through, and you have all risen to the challenge. And also, thank you to the people of Glasgow for their warmth and graciousness and for opening the doors to this beautiful city, the focus of the world's attention these last 2 weeks. One hears many things at the COP, and here is one of the things I heard most. The people here are so nice. It truly warmed our hearts. Finally, I would like to thank everyone at UN Climate Change for their incredible dedication, passion, and support for COP26. This has been, as I just said, a very unique COP. Regardless of the multiple challenges every one of you have faced, you have shown your exceptional professionalism and dedication. Thank you to all from the bottom of my heart. Dear friends, 2 weeks ago, I said in my opening remarks that success at COP26 was possible. I said it would be defined not by 1 or 2 big announcements, but whether we achieved a balanced package of decisions and actions. We started our work with a clear recognition that we are facing a climate crisis, and at the same time that there are critical gaps in terms of mitigation, adaptation, and finance. I believe that the recognition of the relevance and the urgency of the task ahead has allowed many of you to support the consensus, even if it did not completely address all your concerns. I thank you. We will be leaving Glasgow with clarity on the work we need to undertake to reach the 1.5-degree goal. Parties have made progress in several key areas. I want to highlight 4 accomplishments. There are many more, but 4 accomplishments that represent significant progress in the world's efforts against climate change. At this COP, adaptation has been central in all our conversations, and the texts adopted recognize this relevance. We now have a work program to define the global goal on adaptation. This will allow us to identify the collective needs and solutions for the climate impact already happening now in all regions of the world. And the Santiago Network, which provides technical support for countries to address and manage loss and damage, has now been enhanced, strengthening global efforts towards resilience. Regarding finance, an issue extensively discussed here at COP26, all parties agree that much more support needs to be provided to developing countries. In particular, parties have also recognized that the most vulnerable cannot be ignored, that much more finance for adaptation is needed, and it has to be predictable. We welcome the call to at least double finance for adaptation. We know the needs are still very much beyond what is currently available, and parties must continue to focus on this issue. Yes, we are disappointed that the 100 billion pledge remains outstanding, and I call upon all donors to please make it a reality as by next year. And we all know that this is not only about the 100 billion. Initiating the process for the definition of the new global goal on finance as soon as possible is therefore critical. We came into COP26 knowing we had a significant emissions gap, and to address it, parties have collectively agreed to look for ways to increase actions continuously with the overall objective of closing that gap. There can be no doubting the urgency of this task. This is a question of the long-term survival of humanity on this planet. COP26 also sees the finalization of guidelines for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. This is a significant accomplishment. After 6 years of intense negotiations, we have reached a compromise on the pending issue of Article 6. Operationalizing Article 6 will allow parties to scale up their cooperation, mobilize additional finance and private sector engagement, and ensure that the rules are the same for everyone. We also finalized the negotiations on the enhanced transparency framework. This will allow all parties to continue building trust. Dear friends, at COP26, parties built a bridge between good intentions and measurable actions to lower emissions, increase resilience, and provide much-needed finance. A bridge leading to the historic transformation we must make to achieve rapid reductions this decade and ultimately towards the 1.5-degree goal. A bridge between the admirable promises made 6 years ago in Paris to the concrete measures that the science calls for and societies around the world demand. This was clear outside of the formal process as well. We heard pledges to protect forests, oceans, land, and nature. We heard more pledges for adaptation, more action in the healthcare sector. We've heard promises for greater inclusion of indigenous, regional, and local communities. We heard from the activists who marched in peace and pled for you to listen to their cries for climate leadership. We heard from women. We heard from youth, from cities, from regions, from businesses, large and small, for academics, scientists, and countless others. And here we have our two champions, the champion from Chile, champion from the UK, Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Muñoz. Thank you very much. It was actually very, very exciting, the program, the things that you organized there in the action area. Now, for every announcement made, we look forward to firm plans and the fine print. But, dear friends, the road to climate action does not end in Glasgow. Despite your accomplishments, we are still far off the trajectory of stabilizing global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. It's imperative we see more climate action this decade to achieve it. The emissions gap remains a serious threat, as do the gaps in finance and adaptations. NDCs must be significantly boosted. As the Secretary General said, every country, city, company, and financial institution must credibly and verifiably reduce their emissions and decarbonize their portfolios starting now. We must continue to work together to achieve it. Thousands of non-governmental observers have come to this conference. All have a voice. These participants were, are, and will continue to be more than a source of inspiration. They are a source of solutions. I call upon parties to make a greater commitment to include observers in our process moving forward. I have already made a commitment to them to review what has been their engagement in the process so far, the experiences over the years, and then reflect on how we can ensure greater inclusivity moving forward. That work will begin immediately. Dear friends, some of the oldest and most magnificent bridges in the world can be found here in Scotland. It is therefore fitting that the bridge to historic transformation we must achieve has been built here in Glasgow. But bridges are meant to be crossed, and cross we must. The waters of the climate emergency are rising rapidly. We must continue to fight for hope. And while hope will light our way forward, we will remain vigilant that promises pledged and are promises kept, that the billions looking to you have their hopes reflected in your decisions. I once again thank all of you for making COP26 a success and for working so hard. Let us enjoy what we have accomplished, but let us also prepare for the next chapter of our journey together with Egypt in beautiful Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
I think Saudi Arabia would like to make an intervention. Saudi Arabia?
No, thank you, Chair. We're waiting for the floor to be opened.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Patricia. So, dear friends, after 2 years of incredibly hard work, we have our Glasgow Climate Pact. And this is down to each and every one of you and your teams, your hard work, your dedication, your willingness to build consensus. And I thank you all and your teams for your extraordinary and I would say heroic efforts. And I also want to thank my own incredible team for the past 2 years and all the work that has gone into making this conference happen. I also thank them for putting up with me. Could we have a round of applause for the UK team? I also thank our observers, civil society, and young people for keeping up the pressure, for constantly reminding us that communities around the world expected us to deliver here in Glasgow. Thank you. And I, of course, thank those most climate-vulnerable parties who never let us forget what is at stake. Parties whose people are already suffering the worst effects of climate change and whose moral authority has powered this process forward. Together, over these 2 weeks, parties have demonstrated what the world had come to doubt, that countries can rise above their differences to unite against a common challenge, and that this multilateral process can deliver. Now, I know that some parties, many of you, have sacrificed wording that you held dear for the sake of a balanced outcome, and I thank you for doing so. Just as I thank parties that have held their nerve under pressure so that we can deliver a strong final text. I think we can all be proud of what collectively we have delivered. The decisions we have adopted are part of a broader package, which includes what we have achieved together outside these negotiating halls on nationally determined contributions, on adaptation plans and finance pledges, not to mention our coalitions on coal and forests and cars, and of course the work of the brilliant high-level champions. Taken together, this package charts a course for the world to deliver on the promises made in Paris. This Glasgow Climate Pact drives action on adaptation. It emphasizes the need to act. It sets a clear way forward on the global goal on adaptation, and it urges developed countries to at least double their collective climate finance for adaptation by 2025. It operationalizes the Santiago network on loss and damage, finally giving that issue the focus and attention it deserves. It commits to urgently scale up finance, which is the foundation for faster action and confidence that we can go further. And it sets out actions to empower and engage all of society in driving forward this transition. Collectively, we have acknowledged that a gulf remains between short-term targets and what is needed to meet the Paris temperature goal. And so our pact brings parties back to the table next year to improve their commitments, to drive up ambition across this vital decade. And it emphasizes the urgent need to accelerate our efforts to turn targets into actions to keep 1.5 within reach. And that work must start now. We have also, for the first time, adopted text to scale up clean power and phase down dirty coal. And after no less than 6 years of discussions, friends, we have concluded on those final parts of the Paris Agreement rulebook, on Article 6, on common timeframes, and on transparency. And these put in place the rules and systems to keep us accountable and support increased ambition. Their resolution will unleash the full force of what was agreed in Paris. This is real progress in keeping 1.5 degrees within reach, progress that we have made together. But the need for continual action and implementation to match ambition must continue throughout this decade. I think today we can say with credibility that we have kept 1.5 degrees within reach, but its pulse is weak. And it will only survive if we keep our promises, if we translate commitments into rapid action, and if we deliver on the expectations set out in this Glasgow Climate Pact to increase ambition to 2030 and beyond, and if we close the vast gap that remains, as we must. Because as Prime Minister Mia Mottley told us at the start of this conference, for Barbados and other small island states, she said, 2 degrees is a death sentence. Friends, it is up to all of us to sustain our lodestar of keeping 1.5 degrees within reach, to continue our efforts to get finance flowing and boost adaptation. After the collective dedication which has delivered the Glasgow Climate Pact, our work here cannot be wasted. The drive towards 1.5 for a cleaner, healthier, more prosperous and more resilient world must continue, and we must continue that together. At the start of this summit, the world was asking, quite rightly, do the parties assembled here in Glasgow have the courage to rise to the scale of the challenge? Well, my friends, you have responded. We have responded. History has been made here in Glasgow. And what we now need to ensure that the next chapter charts the success of the commitments that we have solemnly made together in the Glasgow Climate Pact. Thank you. Friends, we still have some of the agenda to go. You can't go for dinner yet. I now open the floor to hear statements from groups and parties. And I would urge groups to make brief 3-minute statements and upload the full text to the submission portal. After hearing statements from groups, the floor will be open for statements from the observer organizations, and I encourage them to make brief statements of 2 minutes each. Full text will be made available on the submission portal. I would now like to invite statements, first from the 4 groups with non-overlapping membership. So I open the floor for group statements from the 4 main groups for non-overlapping membership, and I call on Guinea to take the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Executive Secretary, rapporteurs of the Secretariat. Before I read out the final statement on behalf of this group, I would like to make the following statement to express our regret regarding paragraphs 73 and 74 of 1CM3 on losses and damage. We are far from the specific appeal for the establishment of a financial mechanisms for loss and damage that the group had met to implement and launch here in Glasgow. But in a spirit of compromise, we can live with these paragraphs, however, provided that it is clear that this would not prejudge the unambiguous result we are seeking in terms of loss and damages for vulnerable states, which, due to the history of human rights and common decency, the Group of 77 and China will continue to endeavor towards. And we understand that the dialogue on paragraph 73 and 74 aims as its ultimate goal the establishment of a financial mechanism for loss and damage. Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Guinea has the honor to speak now on behalf of the Group of 77 and China, made up of 134 countries in development. We represent the voices of 6 billion humans on the planet, amongst whom the almost close to totality of all those who are living in poverty and who are most vulnerable to climate change. Let me at the outset thank you and your team, as well as the Secretariat, for your commitment towards the success of this COP. We wish to express our gratitude to the United Kingdom and its people who have worked night and day to ensure that we can meet in person safely despite the constraints due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over these past 2 weeks, our group has made constructive commitments and engaged with you and your co-facilitators, and we have achieved conclusions here in that spirit in COP26. We have all spent long days and nights here together working towards conclusions and decisions which reflect a compromise whilst seeking to be ambitious and fair. In some areas, we have succeeded. In others, we have failed. Allow me to emphasize that this group, with its 134 members, began these negotiations in good faith and showed great flexibility. As Nelson Mandela said, our experience has shown us that with goodwill, we can find negotiated solutions even for the most difficult problems. Our multilateral cooperation system on climate change in the framework of the Convention, the Paris Convention Agreement, and the Kyoto Protocol is fundamental. It's based on equity and respective responsibilities, and it reflects the essential truth that all of our countries have different situations due to history, economics, the culture, geography, and the environmental conditions in which they find themselves. Initiatives taken outside this multilateral systems must be compatible with what we agreed to here. What we have in common is our shared humanity and our conviction that together we can build up a better world for ourselves and for future generations. And this is the goal towards which we must strive. In order to achieve it, we must always bear in mind that in the end, for the developing countries, fighting climate change means fighting poverty and creating hope for a better future for all of us. Fighting climate change must take place in a context of cooperation and a genuine partnership between all of us, rather than through a perspective of competition and purely an economic aspect. We cannot separate the fight against climate change from our fight against worldwide inequality and the historic conditions which gave rise to these inequities. The developing world has come to the COP with the hopes that what we do here will demonstrate our shared commitment and to work with the developed world, which should be genuine partners in the COP and the Paris Agreement. We want COP26 to send a clear signal to the rest of the world. We want COP26 to be the COP that we had hoped for. What we do here will affect our future and the future of our children. Our failures would make their lives more difficult. Our success would give them hopes for a better future. For developing countries, for those who are poorest and most vulnerable, who are least responsible for climate change, this is the hopes for a better world, and that is what moves us towards ever greater engagement towards this process, whatever the frustrations and the pace of achievements that we can see. We will not be satisfied with high-flowing words when our future is at stake. For those who would wish to deprive us of means to implement the tools to fight climate change, whether this is climate finance, adaptation finance, losses and damages, technology transfer, I would say here, come to our islands, come to our coasts, come to our mountains, our forests, and our deserts, as well as our savannas. Come to our rural and urban communities, the poor areas where people live, and come experience what it means to be hungry and to be thirsty. To have to seek shelter, to have to wonder whether one's children will have enough to eat for the next meal, while droughts and typhoons and floods due to climate change make life more and more difficult. As Morris Strong in 1992 said when the convention was adopted, history reminds us that what is not possible today might be inevitable tomorrow. In our developing countries, we are all doing our best with what we have at hand, but we could do more if the developed countries made efforts to reduce their emissions and provided us the means for implementation. This partnership is at the core of this convention and the Paris Agreement, and this is what the G77 and China stand for. Allow me to conclude with the words pronounced in 1961 by the great statesmen and Pan-Africanists, the late immortal strategist of the revolutions, Ahmed Sékou Touré, the first president of my country, the Republic of Guinea. And I would just recall to all of us, in particular those our partners from developed countries, that we are building our shared humanity. And for the developed countries, and I quote, "We ask not to be judged or not to think of us in terms of what we have been or even in terms of what we are now, but rather to think of us in terms of history and what we will be in the future." Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Guinea, for your statement. I now invite the European Union to deliver a statement, but may I also add my very grateful thanks to our partners, Italy, who worked with us on COP26, on Youth COP, on pre-COP. My grateful thanks to Italy and particularly Roberto Cingolani as well for his great partnership. So European Union, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. Let me first thank the COP presidency and you personally, Mr. Sharma, for your wise leadership and your tireless and dedicated work during these past months and of course during these past 2 weeks, which resulted in a balanced and ambitious outcome that we were looking for. We might not have received everything we wanted, but with the decisions adopted, we can leave Glasgow with strong confidence that this COP was a step in the right direction. It is important that we were able to agree on the need to significantly reduce global emissions already in this critical decade. Parties need to update their NDCs as part of a response to climate urgency in line with what science tells us. This is the only way to keep the goal of 1.5 alive. For the EU, it is of key importance that we were able to conclude on the rulebook. This way, we will be able to fully implement the Paris Agreement with the necessary ambition for reaching climate neutral and resilient future. For achieving this goal, we will have to align all financial flows with pathway towards GHG emissions, low GHG emissions, and climate resilience development. Equally important is the determination to increase climate finance, especially for adaptation for most vulnerable developing countries. EU will remain committed to scale up its contributions to climate finance. We welcome the progress made in relation to the global goal on adaptation and welcome the agreement on the functions of Santiago Network for loss and damage. I'm very pleased to announce that some member states have already expressed their will to provide financial support for it. Here in Glasgow, we succeeded to put loss and damage on the agenda of our work, which is in particularly important for the most vulnerable countries. Important for the implementation of the Paris Agreement was active involvement of civil society, particularly the youth and non-party actors. The EU will continue to support the global climate agenda and the work of all non-party stakeholders in the fight against climate change. Mr. President, colleagues, our responsibility for achieving goals of the Paris Agreement is a shared commitment of all of us. We need to do everything we can to substantially increase climate ambition. Only together we can achieve our common goals for a better future. And now let me give the floor to the Executive Vice President.
Thank you very much. And I'll be mercifully brief this time, dear Alok. You know, my favorite Glaswegian is a man called Billy Connolly. He's a monument of humor and humanity. And he once said that Scotland has 2 seasons, June and winter. Sadly, we were not able to verify whether that's true, but what we do know, being here in Glasgow, that we need to be thankful to the citizens of Glasgow and of Scotland to have been our hosts in the last couple of weeks. And if someone doesn't believe in the possibility of transition, they should talk to people who knew Glasgow in the 1980s and then look at Glasgow today. Glaswegians have completed a miracle in transforming their city from an industrial old city into this vibrant modern city where it's just a delight to walk around. But Billy Connolly also taught me never to become cynical. Billy Connolly is also somebody who lived and lives according to what Churchill said about success, walking from failure to failure, never losing your good humor. And I have to say, being in this process, you need something of that. And what you did, Alok, in the last 2 years, not walking from failure to failure, but never losing your sense of humor and your good humor. And that was extremely important to get us where we are now. Now, my colleagues have said everything that needs to be said about the content of what we have decided. And the fact that we said on the outset we need to keep 1.5 alive and that we've achieved that is of historic importance, But to people outside of this room, 1.5 very often doesn't mean anything. But to be able to say to our children, to our citizens, listen, if we do what we promise here, humanity will learn to live within planetary boundaries, which means that there is a prosperous, safe future for every human being on this planet. And I think that is a promise that we should keep, which means that we can savor the success of today for an hour or two, go out and have a wiki or something else. We deserve that, you certainly deserve that. But tomorrow the work starts again, so that we continue in the same pace to make sure that when we meet each other again in Sharm el-Sheikh, we can say, yes, we're on 1.5. And that's what we've agreed today. So all those of us who sometimes lose hope that the multilateral system can deliver should watch what happened today. Almost 200 countries coming together on an agenda of such ambition that we have not seen since Paris. And that gives me hope. That gives me the hope that I can tell my kids and my grandson we can actually achieve something for you, not for us. We are not in this for us, but for you. And I want to thank all the colleagues here who've contributed to this. And I'll give you one promise. It doesn't stop here, it only starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, France. Thank you to the European Union for that statement. I now invite the Environmental Integrity Group to deliver a statement. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President Alok, honourable ministers, dear colleagues. I have the honour to deliver this statement on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group, comprising Georgia, Liechtenstein, Mexico, Monaco, the Republic of Korea, and my own country. Mr. President, it was a long day. There were 2 weeks with long days. The main task of this COP is accomplished. We have adopted important decisions. The EIG team has prepared an excellent speech highlighting what we have achieved and what not, but in the interest of time, we will upload our statement in the submission portal, and I would like to say in the name of EIG just this. Keeping 1.5 degree alive is a North Star of our common commitment. With the decisions we adopt today, or we have adopted today, we are building further the track for our journey towards the 1.5 degree objective. It is now up to us to drive the electric engine at full speed, but it is also clear that the rail track is not yet fully built up to the goal. We did build here only for the first miles. There are still bridges to be built to get over the rough canyons. The EIG remains committed to build the track up to our common target. We wish all a safe travel home, and we look forward to continue our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, France. I now invite the Umbrella Group to deliver a statement. Australia, you have the floor.
Chair and distinguished colleagues, I have the privilege to speak on behalf of the Umbrella Group of countries. The Umbrella Group thanks and congratulates the Presidency, the subsidiary body chairs and the Secretariat for their efforts to ensure successful outcomes at COP26. This has been the most important meeting since parties concluded negotiations for the Paris Agreement in 2015. We are pleased at this meeting we have made important steps toward raising our ambition in this critical decade to meet the challenge of keeping 1.5 degrees within reach, and we have at last agreed the final implementation arrangements for the Paris Agreement. We welcome the efforts of our fellow groups and delegates over the past 2 weeks to work constructively on the critical issues on the COP26 agenda. Finalisation of the Paris rules on markets and transparency, as well as progressing common timeframes, climate finance and adaptation. We are pleased to have at last completed our work on the enhanced transparency framework. Essential to delivering on our nationally determined contributions and having common standards in place to ensure countries can track their emissions and progress on their commitments. We also welcome the completion of negotiations on Article 6. The conclusion of rules for the operation of carbon markets paves the way for greater ambition and cooperation. The timely completion of negotiations on common timeframes will provide important certainty for future commitments. We underline the critical role climate finance plays in supporting countries to transition to a net zero future, adapt to the impacts of climate change and enhance nature-based solutions. We need to achieve the 100 billion goal as fast as possible and continue to improve our collective efforts to ensure all countries and finance providers, both public and private, are working to align finance flows with low emissions and climate resilient development, as reflected by Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement. The agreed ad hoc work program to guide our deliberations on a new global post-2025 climate finance goal is an important step forward in this regard. We recognise the need to scale up efforts on adaptation, including adaptation financing, recognising that all countries are impacted by climate change, and SIDS and LDCs are particularly vulnerable to its adverse impacts. We welcome the agreement on the work program on the global goal on adaptation. We've also heard the strong call at this COP for strengthened action to avert, minimise and address loss and damage. We welcome the decisions that have been taken today and stand ready for further dialogue. Mr. President, the Umbrella Group is pleased to be leaving Glasgow with ambitious commitments and an agenda and framework to deliver on what we have promised, to support our collective efforts to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. There is still much more to be done, but COP26 has set us on the right path.
Thank you, Australia, for your statement. I see that Egypt has requested the floor. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, I would like to echo friends here in this room that those 2 weeks have included a lot of hard work. Thanks definitely would go to Patricia and her team for all the hard work, for the parties, for the observers, but for the utmost thanks to you as the President of COP26 and to your team. In that regard, Mr. President, I would like to propose a draft resolution submitted by the Arab Republic of Egypt entitled Expression of Gratitude to the Government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the people of the city of Glasgow. The resolution would read as follows. The Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement, having met in Glasgow from 31st of October to 12th of November 2021, expressed their profound gratitude to the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for having made it possible for the 26th session of the Conference of the Parties, the 16th session of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the 3rd session of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement to be held in Glasgow. Secondly, request the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to convey to the city and the people of Glasgow the gratitude of the Conference of the Parties. The Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement, for the hospitality and warmth extended to the participants. This is the resolution. We will be leaving Glasgow, Mr. President, with much more work to do as the Arab Republic of Egypt to prepare to host you all in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Yasmin. I now invite the COP to adopt the resolution, expression of gratitude to the Government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and the people of the city of Glasgow. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I now request COP Rapporteur Ahmed Rajabi to assume the chair.
Now I invite Bhutan to deliver a statement on behalf of LDC. You have the floor.
Presidency, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the 46 least developed countries representing 1 billion people across Asia, Pacific, Africa, and Caribbean. Allow me to begin by associating with a statement made by the Republic of Guinea on behalf of G77 and China. Allow me also to once again commend the Presidency for the work that you have done to convene us during the COVID-19 pandemic and for seeing us through to the adoption of the Glasgow Climate Pact. During the last 2 weeks, we have heard acknowledgements that the climate crisis is here again and again. The LDCs knows this firsthand. Everyone in this room understands the emergency, but this understanding is not reflected in our collective action. Though we know emissions must halve by 2030, they continue to increase. Climate finance must increase to support vulnerable countries and their people to adapt as best as possible and address the unavoidable loss and damage, yet promises have not been met. The LDC group came to COP26 with high expectations. We leave Glasgow with a package that we can accept, but one that is not enough to protect the lives and livelihoods of our people. Our future depends on our success to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We welcome the recognition that rapid, deep, and sustained emission reduction are needed. Our enhanced NDC must collectively meet the 45% reduction by 2030, and updated long-term strategies must get us to net zero by 2050. On finance, we have far more to go on many fronts. The goal of $100 billion per year by 2020 has not been met. Developed countries must urgently meet the commitment and ensure an increase in adaptation finance, the majority of which should be grant-based. We hope that countries will also commit to doubling their adaptation finance from 2019 levels by 2025. On loss and damage, we must register that the Glasgow outcome fell short of what the LDCs expected. We are disappointed that a Glasgow loss and damage facility could not be an outcome of this scope. Support for addressing loss and damage remains a critical issue for our countries and vulnerable population who are already bearing the greatest cost of the climate crisis despite contributing the least to it. We are also concerned that the loss and damage paragraph in the COP and CMA decision do not mirror each other, but reiterate that this does not prejudice further discussion on the governance of the WIM, which remains under both bodies. While we accept call for a dialogue in the spirit of compromise, we accept it with the understanding that this dialogue will eventually lead to the establishment of loss and damage facility. On adaptation, we recognize the progress on the global goal on adaptation and look forward to proactively engaging in the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program. Presidency, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we continue to hear that countries are committed to addressing the climate emergency, but words are easier than action. As temperature continues to grow, so does the adverse impact of climate change. The upcoming years will be critical in seeing a trajectory for the decade and to ensure a safer and better world for all, including for the youth and for the future generation. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Now I invite Antigua Barbuda deliver a statement on behalf of AOCs. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, Antigua and Barbuda takes the floor on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. We associate ourselves with the statement by the Republic of Guinea on behalf of the Group of 77 in China. We thank the COP presidency for your tireless efforts to support nearly 200 parties across this finish line. You pulled off a tremendous international event in the midst of a global pandemic. Addressing the climate crisis could not wait. We appreciate the people of Glasgow and Edinburgh whose warm hospitality kept us going over these weeks. We thank you. And to the engine behind this process, the UNFCCC Secretariat and hundreds of staff that made this possible, we recognize and commend your efforts. The Paris Agreement work program is complete. After years of deliberation, we overcame our differences and found a common path to guide implementation. One common time frame synchronizes our efforts in the Plan, Implement, Review cycle. The enhanced transparency framework will build mutual trust, the currency of multilateralism. Article 6 is now agreed. The mandatory 2% cancellation rate under 6.4 was a major compromise from our AOCIS position. The small silver lining is that we will revisit this figure in 5 years with a track record on the overall impact of the markets on global emissions. Finance Day at COP26 celebrated historic climate commitments from companies covering $130 trillion in financial assets. We implore the private sector to apply today's new best practice guidelines, especially the 5% share of proceeds for adaptation and 2% cancellation rate, as they use the carbon market in 6.2. We have done our job with Article 6 to the best of our abilities. It's time for the private sector to do their job too. On loss and damage, despite our best efforts, both at a political and a technical level, AOCIS was not successful in listing loss and damage as a distinct category in the transparency framework for support. Particularly vulnerable countries must now report loss and damage in a catch-all column at the end, marginalizing our priority. We recognize the presidency's efforts to try to create a space to find common ground. The final landing zone, however, is not even close to capturing the essence of what we hoped. While happy that the Santiago Network has finally been given a mandate and functions to do work, technical assistance is only a minor part of the overall solution. Small island nations are already borrowing money to cope with and recover from extreme slow onset climate costs, forced to tap into pension funds, relocate communities, manage internal displacement and internal migration. When elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. The UN Climate Change Convention must protect the most vulnerable nations. Yet, safeguards are not in place. When a few hectares of an island's arable land are lost to seawater intrusion, imported food now costs 5 times as much. What next? When a hurricane destroys hospitals and schools, what next? One-off finance pledges do not give us the confidence that our future is secure. We know that you know that island states can no longer absorb the cost of pollution from others. At COP26, we relented on this loss and damage finance facility reluctantly because this package in front of us is our best shot at keeping 1.5 alive. Looking ahead, COP27 will be a referendum for justice in climate change. On mitigation ambition, at yesterday's plenary meeting, we heard a unanimous and profound call for urgent actions for the sake of our future generations, and a clear shift in this room to support keeping 1.5 alive. Today, we have not closed the 1.5-degree emissions gap, but we have set out a process that keeps it in reach, but only if each and every party does their part, coming back to the table with higher pre-2030 ambition. And then implement these plans. Implementation mode requires that we not only talk about theoretical emissions pathways, but also concretely about sources of emissions and sectors and technologies to scale urgently. The same applies to adaptation and resilience, where risks are more insidious and harder to quantify than tons of emissions, but equally important. AOSIS welcomes the 2-year work plan ahead on the global goal on adaptation. The goal of at least doubling adaptation finance is critical, coupled with concrete measures to improve access. On finance, the final decision has galvanized the need for institutions to include climate vulnerabilities in concessional finance and other forms of support. While we have arrived at an acceptable package on finance, the language is slippery. We have been burned before. We heard that our developed country partners will hold themselves to the same standards they hold us when delivering on these financial obligations. As small island states, we are pleased that the ocean, which plays an important role in solving the climate crisis, has been given due recognition. We welcome the decision text on a forum and the invitation to